Welcome back to another episode of Maximum Lawyer. Today, I'm going to be talking about agentic workflows and the four that are probably going to work best for you and your law firm. Before I get into that, though, I want to make sure I bring up our texting line as I normally do. Just remind you, I'd love to hear from you. I get great ideas from you all, get great questions from you all. Keep them coming. 314-501-9260, 314-501-9260. Save it to your phone. And that way you don't have to remember. It will be in the show notes, but shoot me a text just to say hi. Love to hear from you. So the episode that I'm going to do today, it came up because I did a training inside the guild this week, and I showed everyone the back end of what I built out a few test things to show off people, but it's because we've been building out things on our back end. I actually created a special environment to build out some workflows to show people some ideas on how they could use it and how they can build some more workflows themselves when it comes to different AI agents. And one of the things I talked about were the four agentic frameworks that you can use in your own workflows. And there are probably technically others, but these are the four primary agentic frameworks that you're going to be dealing with for the most part. So I'm going to go through those because I think it would be pretty helpful for people to have a basic idea as to how some of these frameworks would work. And before I get into this, if you don't know what an AI agent is, okay, I want you to think about it from this perspective. This might change your view as to how you might view them. Obviously, you've got AI, right? You've got the different LLMs like ChatGPT, Grok, Gemini, right? Those are LLMs. Those are not agents themselves. But the way you can think about an AI agent is think of them as how you would think about an employee and the things that they can do. Only they're AI, okay? So when we're talking about an AI agent, we're talking about things like they can go out and do things. And I'm going to use the terminology think. They don't really think. I understand that. But if you think about it from that perspective, though, that they can go and they can process it. So automation is, if this happens, then that happens, down a line that you could create a bunch of automation. What the AI agents will do, and the way to differentiate it is it's got that thinking component. Okay. Again, I understand they're not really thinking, but they're able to analyze information and then do extra things with it. All right. That is the main difference. There's more, but that's the gist of it. So I can talk about a lot of different things that we covered this week, but I'm gonna really limit this down. I'm gonna try to limit this episode down to just the four different frameworks. And then I can cover other things like what are the things that you really need to have before you start building out these different workflows and all that. I can do that in other episodes. This one, just the four frameworks. So the first one is something called prompt chaining. Okay. And that's just sequential agent workflows where the output of one agent becomes an input for the next one, right? The more to put it into English, it's like an assembly line. Okay, so one agent does one thing, they hand it off to the next agent, they hand it off to the next agent, all the way until it gets to the end of the line, right? That's prompt chaining, right? Start to finish, boom, done. Okay, that's the easiest way of putting it. That's probably the most common one because people are used to kind of thinking that way. It's sort of a linear way of thinking. And I think that people think of linear thinking as sort of a bad thing. I don't. I think that it's a normal way of thinking about something. And an example that I created for that is maybe you create articles, or I call them articles, blog post for your website, for your firm. You could do it for really any content, but you've got sort of an outline agent. You have someone that edits or an agent that then edits the outline, and then an agent that drafts it, and then an agent that actually posts it, all that, right? So you have it sort of in a chain until it gets posted to your website. All of that can be done from, using an agent. It doesn't have to require a human at all. The next one, and this is where we start to get a little bit more complicated. It's called a routing framework. And think of this more as maybe kind of like the way a receptionist would work. Calls come in from all over the place, right? And then they get routed to different people. That sometimes they get solved right on the spot. Sometimes they get, transferred to Jane down the hallway. Sometimes they get transferred to you, but everything's routed. Okay. And the one that I showed in the training this week was emails that come through. And so certain emails come through, and I used 4 different examples, but you can use, I mean, it's really unlimited, the number of types of emails that come through. Think about all the different types of emails you come through, and you can have them routed in certain ways. And I'm not talking about filters, right? I'm talking about you can have tasks created from them. You can have automatic replies to those if you wanted to. I think that's a little daring, but you can have lots of different things. I use the example of leads, right? Let's say you have different types of leads, and you can have them sort of pre-qualified using this process, and then have automatic, texts and emails go out that are more tailored to the message that they actually submitted, which I think is kind of cool way of looking at it. So you can get really creative. And when it comes to these examples I'm giving, you can apply this in a lot of different ways when it comes to routing, but routing is another framework that you can use. The next one I want to give you it's called parallelization. Okay. Parallelization framework. That's a tough one to do, but in this one, you're having multiple agents working on the same thing at the same time, not the same thing, but doing different tasks at the same time. And then later on down the line, they converge to sort of the finished product. Again, this is, if you think about just any kind of a case, I can tell you, like from personal injury, at the very beginning of the case, we have several things going on. Really, at any given point in the case, we have several things that are going on that then at some point they kind of converge, and maybe where they converge is the demand, right? That's an example. But the example I gave was, prepping for videos. So if you're doing video content, maybe one is preparing the title, right? One of them is preparing a script. And then another one, the example I use is, I want at some point to be able to reference data or statistics in my video that we can use then for graphics. Like those are 3 different things. You could have 20 different agents working at the exact same time. And then they sort of converge to create this master outline that you can do other things with. And then the example I showed had some few other things that you do after that. You can do many, many things when it comes to this, but the framework it's parallelization, right? That's the name of it. And you have multiple things going on at the same time that then sort of converge. And that could also be somewhat linear if you look at the grand scheme of things, somewhat linear. But that is another example. And then the last one, it's sort of a modified version of the first one that we talked about. And when it comes to the prompt chaining, sort of. But this is the Evaluator Optimizer Framework. And by the way, I'm giving you the top 4. Like I said before, there's probably several other examples, but these are like the 4 main frameworks that we're talking about. And on this one, we're talking about where you've got some agents doing work on something, and then it has to be evaluated. And if it's not right, it loops back. Okay. So in the first example, I had the article that was being drafted, and you had the outline drafter, and then after that you had the editor of the outline, and it just kept moving down the line. In this example, what you could do is you have the outline drafter, and then you have instead of an editor, you have the AI evaluator. If it is not right, it loops back, it's redrafted, and then sent back down the line until it's done. And you can have that done instead of having a human. You could actually insert a human into this process too, if you wanted to, but you don't need to. Not for this example, at least. And so what happens is you can do this whenever it comes to the article too. So you can have as many loops in this process as you want. But in this situation, you have it's Evaluator Optimizer, and what you're doing is you're you're evaluating it, and then you're optimizing it until it's good to go, and then you move it on down the line. So that is the Evaluator Optimizer, and I've given you the modified version that we'd given before when it comes to the prompt chaining. That's just an example, right? You could do this with several different things. I talked about demands a little bit earlier. Let's say you have a demand, it's not quite ready. It's evaluated, not ready, and then finally it's ready, it gets optimized, and it gets submitted to you for review. That's something that could be done. And like I said, there's several other things I can go to with this that I'm not going to. I'm going to hold off because even though I really want to talk about all the different things that you need, and some things that you can add on to this, kind of bolt onto it and make it even better. I'm not going to get into all that. There are, I think just starting with the basics is really, really important. So just as a quick refresher, the 4 major agentic frameworks that you can use for efficient workflows: prompt chaining, routing, Evaluator Optimizer, and then parallelization. That's the tough one. But that's all I have for us today. As a reminder, I'd love to hear from you. If you have anything else when it comes to AI or anything else you want me to cover, 314-501-9260. Would love to hear from you. Until next week, remember that consistent action is the blueprint that turns your goals into reality. Take care, everybody.